Welcome to North Carolina Tech Association's State of the Technology Industry Report briefing. That's a whole mouthful. I'm Andrea Fleming, Director of Talent and Workforce Development for NC Tech. I'm happy to welcome you all to our session this morning. So NC Tech is a not-for-profit, membership-driven trade association and the primary voice of the technology industry in North Carolina. NC Tech's mission is to foster growth and champion innovation in North Carolina's tech sector while providing a voice for the tech community. Our membership is close to 600 member companies, organizations, and institutions employing more than 200,000 in North Carolina. Our work covers 4 major areas: professional networks, government affairs, sector promotion, and talent development. And supporting all of these areas is our research products produced by NC Tech. So we have 3 major research projects, 2 that are annual, 1 that is produced once a month. Our monthly IT job trends shares data on tech job postings, top skills, top job titles, hiring companies, and also regional activity across the state. The Tech Innovation Index is produced annually with the most recent release in October 2022. That index compares tech performance in North Carolina metros against other top metros in the country, with metrics grouped into 3 sub-indices of tech talent supply, tech talent demand, and innovation. And finally, the State of the Technology Industry Report, also released annually, that details the economic impact of the tech industry and analyzes metrics such as changes in STEM programming, tech wages, research and development, tech startup growth, and diversity in the tech industry. So joining us today is Ted Abernathy, Managing Partner of Economic Leadership. NC Tech partners with Economic Leadership for both the Tech Innovation Index and the State of the Technology Industry Report. So Economic Leadership, based in Charlotte, did I say that right, Ted?
Yes.
North Carolina, is a small group of data, strategy, and policy experts working with clients to analyze competitiveness, develop strategy, identify locations, and reimagine the future. Over the past 9 years, the team has worked on 146 projects in more than 20 states and internationally. Ted is the principal author of close to 100 reports on future trends, economic and workforce development, technology, and leadership, and he speaks on the economy somewhere almost every week. In fact, he's flying out, I believe, right after this session today. He currently serves as economic advisor to the Council of State Chambers and previously held a similar position to the Southern Governors Association. In his 42-year career, Ted has led city, county, and regional economic development organizations and an economic policy think tank. Born in Dallas, North Carolina, Ted received his bachelor's degree from University of Chapel Hill. Sorry, skipped over that. University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. His master's from Johns Hopkins, and is the graduate of Economic Development Institute and is an Eisenhower Fellow for Global Economics. He and his wife live in Charlotte, a small town on the North Carolina coast, and share their backyard with hundreds of seabirds and quite a few alligators. Also joining us on the call this morning is Skylar Casey, who works with Ted, specializing in data collection, stakeholder interviews, and data analysis. Prior to his work with Economic Leadership, he worked with RTI International, but now lives in Colorado with, I'm sure, a different set of wildlife in the backyard than Ted's. Always a pleasure to work with the team at Economic Leadership and Ted's analysis of the data. After Ted's presentation, we will have time for questions at the end. Please add those to the Q&A box, and you can do that during the session or wait until the end. If it's very complicated, you can ask to unmute and we'll unmute your mic and allow you to ask your question live. And with that, I will turn it over to Ted.
Thank you, Andrea. Nice. Skylar currently lives in Salt Lake City, so most of what he sees these days is 2 feet of snow, if I remember right. On the movement from the Front Range in Colorado out that way. So it's nice to be with you all today from heavy pine pollen Charlotte. I know it's coming up to the rest of the state, but we are in full-blown yellow pine pollen down here. So if I cough, I will try really hard to hit the mute button beforehand, but I hope you'll give me a little bit of indulgence on that, because it is pretty wicked this year, especially considering it started in February. It's great to be with you. As you know, we do this live every year, usually in Charlotte. and I have to rush. I'm the last person on the agenda, so whatever the time is left between when I stand up and 2 o'clock, I need to finish. And so, if you've ever been there, you've heard me talk really fast. So today I'm going to talk a little bit slower and try to make sure that we get as much information as possible out to everybody. I hope that worked for everybody sharing their screen. We are looking today at the 9th annual Outlook for Technology. And I think I'm going to do one quick thing with screen share so I can advance it a little bit easier. Let's see here. There we go. And the Outlook for Tech in the state of North Carolina has always been something that's a lot of fun to talk about, because North Carolina has been a tech leader for all of the last decade that we've been doing the report. The economy of the state has outperformed the country overall, and that's always a good place to start with this. North Carolina has grown its job base faster and its population base faster than other states. And as such, the tech industry has been buoyed by having employees that can fill those positions. When you look at the 10-year annual population growth, the nation has sorted itself. If you're in the Northeast or the upper Midwest, then your population has dropped and your working age population has dropped even faster. But if you're in Texas, or the Mountain West, far northwest, the Washington, Oregon, or if you're in our pocket of the Southeast, along with our friends in Tennessee, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, we're the fastest growing part of the country. And even as the country goes, North Carolina has grown almost twice as fast over the last 10 years. I'm sure that in your communities, most of you feel that. It's not even around the state, but most of us are lucky enough to have new employees coming into our state and new people to buoy our economy. It's been 2.5 million people have come to North Carolina since 2000. And half of that is people that have chosen to move from another state to our state. That's a combination of quality of life, economic opportunity, and the overall cost of living, which has remained pretty competitive compared to some other tech regions in the country. We try to look a little bit to see if COVID made any difference and employment job growth. It did. There are places in the country that were growing prior to COVID, but because of the impact, started backing up. But North Carolina is not one of those places. So we've been a leading state, over 3% employment growth since the beginning of COVID. And we were one of the first 10 states to get back to our pre-COVID level. So the economy has stayed strong, and we don't. We look at this in terms of all the types of sectors. We don't really see anything that's going to cause us a lot of concern going forward that North Carolina is not going to continue to be a leading state. Unemployment rates are low. They ticked up the last 2 months, but they have remained at historical lows. If you go back, this goes back 15 years, but if you go back 30 years, 40 years, we are at a tightness right now for labor, and that makes the people moving into our state even more important. We've also changed a lot. For any of you on the call who have been here for more than 20 years, you've been part of a shift in the North Carolina economy, a shift that knowledge-based has replaced some of the trade-based or service-based jobs. So our jobs have not only grown, but the nature of them have changed, and indeed the quality of them, the wages have changed. And that's been driven a lot by the sector. If you look over the last 5 years, warehousing and transportation is the leading shift, and this is the sort of Amazon society that we've been moving into. A lot of jobs there. And remember, this goes through the pandemic, through 2001. Finance and insurance, driven mostly in the Charlotte markets, have grown dramatically. And just behind that, almost even with finance, is our tech industry. So tech continues to grow and continues to become a greater part of the state's overall economy. When we look at the pandemic impacts by industry over the last few years, this chart shows if you're up on that left top corner, these are the places that were growing the most during the pandemic and paid the highest wages. So the vertical axis is the wage chart. And you can see all the parts of technology, energy, IT, life science, environmental tech, along with finance, are what kept the state really growing during that period of time. Obviously, things like accommodations and arts and other things that were impacted by the closures or the stay-home orders were impacted the most. But there was a lifeline for our state with a lot of technology and finance jobs that could be done remotely and kept the state moving. We also are an important part of the state because the tech industry is one of the top industries that generate more jobs. So this is the ripple effect that economists talk about. Tech industry has among the highest because it has among the highest wages. And as people spend money, they create more jobs in the service industry and other places. So technology has that ripple that for every job created by in technology, we're going to get a couple more jobs in other parts of our state economy. But with that sort of framing, we go back every year and look at the industry in pretty heavy detail. Andre mentioned that the report is available at ncstir.com, and it's a big one. People make fun of it sometimes because it's 80 or 90 pages long. So a big report with a lot of data, with a lot of appendices that can provide you more information. So if you really want to dig in, go there and look, and it'll help you. Here's the methodology. People ask routinely, "What's tech?" And I think it's a good question, and one that 10 years ago, when we were thinking about doing this, we thought about a lot. And we ended up with 88 separate national industrial codes, NAICS codes, to characterize what the tech sector is. We used the best information we could use nationally to be consistent with what other people were doing. So we looked at tech, but then we also broke it down. So we have an energy technology sector, an environmental technology, life science, and then what's typically referred to as core tech, which is IT. So in IT, telecom, hardware, and software. And those four are separated within the report. You can see information on each of them. But that's not enough because the tech industry is not the same as tech occupations. So inside an industry, if you work for IBM and you're a software developer, then you're in a tech industry doing a tech job. But you could be in the tech industry and be the groundskeeper for IBM, and you wouldn't be in a tech job. At the same time, you could be working for Belk's department store writing code, and you'd be in a retail industry, but you'd be in a technology occupation. So along with doing this for the industry, we also do it for the occupations. And there's 85 different standard occupational codes that we put into it. So the report is always divided. There's a crossover between people that are in the occupations and in the industry and people who are in one or the other. And we try to provide all of that information. Unlike some researchers, all of our methodologies in the report, you can see it, you can replicate it. If you've got access to Lightcast data and other than the census, you can replicate this kind of data and see where it came from and maybe dig a little deeper for what you want. So start with sort of the bottom line on this. We're now up to 290,000 people in our tech industry, over 25,000 businesses, and $36 billion in wages. That is a higher and higher percentage part of the state economy. That's 12% of every dollar, 12 cents of every dollar that's given to an employee in our state in wages comes from the tech sector. If you look at tech employment over the last few years, and this is just the last 5 years, you can see continuous steady growth, even through a recession and through unprecedented pandemic. The tech sector has continued to grow pretty steadily. When we look at establishments and we look at it over the time we've been doing this report, the last few years, and indeed the last year, are the fastest growing years. 12% growth in businesses in technology in the tech industry last year. It's been consistently growing, but There's a little bit of trough in the middle of there, as you can see. So growth every year, but for a few years there, 4% growth. But the last 2 years, almost 8, and now 12% growth. So we've added a net of over 9,000 new technology businesses over the last 9 years that we've been doing this report. I don't know, Andre, if we're going to do a party next year for the 10th one or not, but we'll have to talk about that. When you look at the individual subcategories of technology, you can see the biggest ones are life science at 98,000 jobs and IT at 150,000 jobs. Those two are our largest sectors. The good news, they're also the sectors that are growing the fastest in the last 2 years through the pandemic and also through the last 5 years. Life science growth has been 27% over that period of time. And just in those two categories, almost 23,000 companies that are doing those types of work. This isn't true in every state. I mean, if we were, Skylar and I were in Colorado a couple of weeks ago with their tech report. Energy tech's a much bigger deal in Colorado, and environmental tech, indeed, more balanced. But in North Carolina, we dug in deep and have really strong life sciences and IT dating back, both of them to the 1970s and 80s in North Carolina. If you look at the wages and what are paid in each of those, we try to make an allowance for the fact that North Carolina's cost of living is not quite as high, so that we use a purchasing power index, and you can see the North Carolina wages compared to the national wages. Some are higher, some are lower, but in all cases, pretty strong wages. Overall, the average wage with purchasing power built in is right just under $150,000 a year. That's below the national average, but multiples of the average wage in North Carolina. So the industry has a lot of impact on the state, and it does so through the wages and the taxes it pays, but it's also a significant driver of higher wealth individuals inside of our state. You can drag this down a little bit lower and go to super sub industries, try to see what's driving all of this. More of this is in the report, so I encourage you to take a look at it. The biggest area for employment is software, just under 90,000 jobs. And the growth in the last 5 years, we've added a third more jobs, 33% growth. We're also adding a lot of jobs in engineering and clean tech, environmental sciences. That's been a big growth. And then North Carolina traditionally has been a state with strong research and development and testing. And the growth right now, the overall employment is 37,000 people, over 2,700 establishments in the R&D and testing, and really fast growth at 38%. We are a state that is known for this. So overall, there are sectors where we're getting deeper in, and as data analytics become more available around the country, when people are looking for those concentrations, they're looking for the depth of the employment base, and that makes us even more competitive. We also measure, since NC Tech is a statewide organization, we measure which counties have a depth of industry. And I want you to pay attention to this map, because I'm going to show you what happens with occupations later, and the map's considerably different. So the industries are clearly concentrated in Wilmington, Charlotte, in the Triangle, some of the Triad. These are the dark purple here, or magenta colors, are where more than 6% of the jobs in a community are tech industry jobs. And it has been broadening, but tech industry jobs do tend to concentrate, as you can see on the map. The employment growth overall, one of the things the report does is measure North Carolina against the other 50 states in the District of Columbia. So the measurement is against 51 from a ranking standpoint. And North Carolina ranked 9th over the last 5 years. So we're in the top 10 for the fastest growing states. Nevada and Maine, percentage-wise, are 1 and 2, and then some people you might expect. Washington's up there, but tech industry growth is occurring in places we might not have expected. So Florida, Tennessee, Utah, places that didn't used to be technology hubs. If you that and you translate it to a map so you can see it, you can see that the Nevada, Utah, Arizona pocket out in the west, some of that is flight out of California, but those states are much more competitive than they used to be. Maine and New Hampshire up in the far northeast, and then in the south, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Florida. And Tennessee and Florida 10 years ago, if we'd have projected tech growth, and we did, we would not have had them in the top 10. They're two states that have been emerging as strong technology competitors as we go forward. When we project forward in the next 5 years, and we use Lightcast to do this type of projections, North Carolina is still in the top 20, but the growth is slowing just a little. We are 17th ranked going forward. This is one of those things we're going to look closely and try to follow real close. Still good growth, but I'm not sure we'll be right on this. I'm hoping North Carolina does a little bit better as we forward. And this is what that map looks like. Tennessee still strong. Georgia pops back up, and the West and Texas are still there. So growth is based on algorithms of the types of jobs you have now and which industries are growing the fastest. So if you're Arizona and you know that semiconductors are beginning to lay down a big concentration in your state, then you're going to look like you're going to grow a lot faster. So part of this might have to do with biotech moving to a lot of automation. But again, we'll watch these data points as we go forward closely. One of the things that Brooks Rayford, the head of NC Tech, loves to talk about is the fact that North Carolina's percentage of women in technology is among the highest and has been consistently. We rank as the second highest concentration state. The District of Columbia is number one, and we're not giving them statehood yet. We have trailed Maine the last couple years of women in technology, but you can see the numbers are pretty dramatically different as you go down. Louisiana, 25% of the tech workers are women, and North Carolina, fully 10 percentage points more than that. I'm on my way to Louisiana this afternoon on an airplane. That's what's on my mind this morning. North Carolina has done a really good job of getting women into the technology industry, but women make up 50% of the workforce, and so there's still room for improvement. There's a lot of room for improvement on the diversity side. This measures the diversity of your state and how that diversity is reflected in technology jobs. We're ranked 22nd there. Some of the leaders at the top, New Hampshire's at the top, but Washington, Oregon, New Jersey, Virginia are places that have done a better job bringing minorities into the technology sector. And so this is an area consistently that we want to do a better job in our state. It's the industry side. Let's talk about the occupations for just a minute. So tech industry, there's 290,000 jobs in the industry, but of people who do a technology job, it's just under 400,000. So there are a lot more people doing tech than in tech, if that makes sense. And I've been kidding with Brooks for 3 or 4 years now that eventually we won't be able to do this report because we'll just do occupations because every industry will be tech dominated. And you can see that happening with logistics and with retail and finance these days. And so when we look at the tech occupation jobs, we're looking at a larger pool in the state. And the tech industry growth has only been 17%. I say only, that's really high, where the people working at a technology occupation is up 38%. So tech is permeating every part of our economy. And the reason that matters so much is if you're training people, if you're talking about K-12 education or community college or higher education, then you're training people for occupations in technology. That doesn't mean they're all going to go work for a software company or a biotech pharmaceutical company. A lot of them will end up working in construction and government and finance. And so the needs of the industry are very important. But that's true for all industries of the types of things we're training young people to be proficient in. Here's that map I was talking about before that I wanted you to remember the old one. And this is what the occupation one looked like 5 years ago. And it's fairly similar, concentrations in the Charlotte area and in the Triangle, a little bit in the mountains down in Wilmington. But in the last 5 years, the map has evolved this, which is that occupations in technology have spread across almost the whole state. And so having the right people with the right skills in technology is now more important to 70 plus of our counties. And it didn't used to be that way. It's changed quickly. So that if you're in Columbus County down in the far southeast, you didn't used to need a lot of tech workers, and now you do. Your industries are demanding that. And so it puts even more pressure on us to make sure that we have the training programs and the exposure in high school to technology. That's what it looks like kind of blown up, and you can see just how much of the state now depends on technology workers for a significant part of their economy. When we look at where those occupations are showing up, one of the big areas of growth is over the last 5 years is in finance and insurance. 20,000 technology workers, many of those in the Charlotte metro area, but spread out all over the state. There's a lot in the Triangle, but as we showed you, everywhere in the state, big growth. Look at the bottom of the chart where construction is. Over 5,000 new tech occupations in the construction industry. And for me, that's a huge thing, because when we look at productivity by sector, construction has been the sector that has lagged the most over the last 25, 30 years in America. And by moving more technology into construction, I think we're going to improve those productivity numbers. When you look at the occupations, again, number one occupation for just raw numbers is software developers, business operations specialists, computer support, market research, systems analysts. There are a lot of individual occupations where we have many, tens of thousands of jobs in the state. They all pay high wages, and they're all growing. When you look at the top 5 in net job growth, again, software developers is up there. It's like what you would have expected. But if you look at the percentage growth on the other side, mathematical science, GIS technicians, data scientists, there's a lot of new types. So when you're thinking about what comes next, what are children going to be preparing for? Lots of different things look like they're going to be in the future. All right, the turnover rate is also a positive for tech workers. We've had a lot of turnover in the last year with jobs. It's been something people have talked about. And so when you look at what's the turnover rates in some of the other industries, the higher wage industries have less turnover, and technology workers is right near the top of the least turnover. It makes it a stable thing for the industry. When you look at the demographics of the tech occupations, again, women do a little better than we do with ethnic minorities in the state. So there's a lot of room for improvement, especially with African Americans or with Hispanics. Look at the occupational growth, North Carolina's 4th. So again, one of the fastest growing states in the country. Median adjusted income, we rank 7th overall for tech occupations. So a top 10 state for the highest incomes. Finally, looking at what's needed in technology, fewer companies are requiring a bachelor's degree these days. Some still do, but about half, some post-secondary. But people are coming straight out of high school these days with the coding skills and with other skills that technology companies need. And so we've seen some of the requirements change over the last few years. News for North Carolina, we've always been a state that produced a lot of educational degrees, now certificates, associate's degrees. We're continuing to rise in computer science, which is one of the areas that has the highest demand. But biomedical and engineering are also on the rise. And one of the newer things that we measure that is a real strength for the state is that North Carolina now ranks third in the growth of our STEM education program completers over the last 5 years. Utah, Kentucky, North Carolina at the top of that list. So we're managing to get more program completers with a real focus on STEM in our high schools and our post-secondary systems. One of the other pieces that measures the success of the state in technology is the infrastructure that supports technology. And a key piece of that infrastructure is the research and development that's done. North Carolina has traditionally had very strong R&D in its research universities, but for a long time wasn't as strong in the business R&D that was performed in the state. We managed to get ourselves up to 12th now. I think we'll probably break into the top 10 sometime soon. That's been a focus of everybody, I think, in the state for the last 20 years, is to make sure that businesses are doing their R&D here. And so moving up, we used to be pretty far down this list. Moving up to 12th is a real accomplishment, and one that I think is driven by an understanding that if businesses are doing R&D in the state, that creates the innovation that drives new business formation. We've also moved up in capital. California, Massachusetts continue to be the leaders in venture capital, but North Carolina is now in the top 10. And depending on how you measure this, it moves from year to year, but the last few years have been strong years for the state. We're in the middle of the pack when it comes to affordability. We look at a bunch of factors that are listed in the report, but just looking at housing burden, the places that are the highest housing burdens in California, New Jersey, New York, places that we've seen an exodus from in the last 3 or 4 years as affordability has become more important to people. We're in the middle, but it's something you have to watch. And if you look at the states that have the best tech sectors and are affordable, then North Carolina shines in that. But you have to tend it. If you become unaffordable, then at some point, technology sector is going to get pretty skittish about putting new investment in your state. The key takeaways from all of this are pretty. I mean, they're mostly pretty good. We score in the highest area in quite a few of the things we want to. We are not. The top one there is the location quotient. I didn't talk about that, but North Carolina is a diverse economy. It has strong manufacturing. It has strong agriculture. It has strong finance. And so as a state, the concentration of technology is not the highest percentage like it would be in some other states. There are other states that tech is their thing. That's what they have. North Carolina, it's one of the things we have. We're still strong in it, but the concentration is not among the leaders, but it has been growing. Over, I think, the whole time we've been doing this report, every year it gets more and more concentrated. And so that's something that you celebrate, even though we're not in a top 10 yet. The expected tech growth for the next 5 years is something, as I said, we want to make sure we watch, because we are projecting right now we're out of the top 10, and we want to make. I hope we're wrong, but we'll see how that goes in the next little while. Occupation, the tech quotient is also just above 1, so we're just above the national average. Again, diversified economy, and that's part of this. But our occupational growth has been great. The earnings have got us in the top 10 now, so jobs are paying pretty well in the state. And if you look at all of the other sort of infrastructure takeaways, almost all of them are improving over the last few years. We have gotten better in our R&D as a percentage of GDP. We've gotten better in our business R&D. We've gotten better in venture capital, much better in STEM education, much better in completers, just overall in STEM work. So we think the infrastructure has improved and is continuing to improve. That lays a pretty good foundation for the future. Our projections are that we will still outperform the American South and outperform the country. The question is, how are we going to do among the other tech leaders? So overall, long-term estimates are that North Carolina's tech sector stays very strong going forward. And look at occupational monthly postings. you all probably everybody on this call knows that you're either hiring or you're not, and that is one of the things that tends to be a little bit of a roller coaster with technology. There's so many small firms driven by what their clients are, their subcontractors are, that there's a lot of people in the tech sector that you ramp up and then you ramp down. We've been talking a lot about this nationally, and the tech layoffs are a percentage of the hires over the last 3 years. But as technology normalizes after the pandemic, then there's going to be some reshuffling of where those tech jobs are, which companies. And also, we could spend a whole day talking about the impacts of technological innovation and which technologies are growing and which ones are being marginalized by new innovation. And so it's not stable. But what makes North Carolina work are the fundamentals are here for good overall workforce, good overall cost of doing business, lots of innovation, and that is the underpinning for where we're going. So I'll stop there. Andrea, I'll let you ask some questions. I'm going to quit sharing the screen, and I encourage anybody to ask us anything they want. We'll try to answer it for you.
Okay. Thank you, Ted. And that did help going a little slower. We don't give you enough time at Outlook. We have a lot of people on our agenda at that conference. Sorry.
Okay.
So nice to have this. Nice to have this time to slow down a bit. So the first question we had was what's happening in terms of the pipeline to push students to pursue tech, especially given the disparity there may be in terms of rural counties versus counties like Wake. What actions are being taken to improve diversity in tech, number of women in tech?
Yeah, so big, broad questions. And so if somebody asks us to do a best practice study in North Carolina, that'd be different. And we don't do that, an operational study. I happen to know that there are lots of programs that are out there for tech. STEM East is a big one that just got refunded pretty substantially. So the idea is to push tech interest down to the junior high level and try to get kids interested in it, work on internships and apprenticeships. But it's happening across the state at the local level. And as the questioner pointed out, some areas have a lot more capacity to do that at the local level than others. I think that there's a lot of room for looking at what's happening nationally. We do a lot of workforce assessment programs across the country, and there's a significant number of states that are pushing more technology and that. I mean, there are states that require everybody to take coding. There are states that require everybody to take statistics. So some of it is just broad statewide curriculum adjustments, which I don't think have been made yet. Curriculum design in America is a pretty confrontational thing these days. So I'm not sure that you're going to see a lot of that from the state level. I think at the local level, places like Golden Leaf Foundation and others are heavily funding experiments, especially in rural North Carolina. There's a lot of money with the recent funding that's come out of the federal government for those types of things. So that's part of it. Now, second question on diversity is harder because now you're trying to target specific high schools that are heavily minority, and they tend to be high schools with the least amount of money that's generated at the local level. And so adding programs that have more career and technical education would be a way to do that, but it's not something that has been done as much. I think diversity attempts for retraining of young adults and middle-aged adults are the way to go. There are examples of that, but they're not widespread. So I think we got a lot of work left to do on that. If somebody should, doesn't have to be us, but somebody should look at what's going on in terms of specific programs in North Carolina on encouraging diversity in technology. Tech companies, by and large, need workers, just flat out. So anybody who can get the skills, I think, would be welcome at those tech companies. And it's a matter of making sure that people are exposed to those skills at an early age, or that we bring them back in and retrain them as they get into adulthood.
Right. One comment about that, there is DPI is working, not everyone knows the acronyms. North Carolina Department of Public Instruction is working to get computer science as a requirement for high schools. So if that happens, not sure, but that will be a good move to at least get high schoolers a little more exposed to the tech industry. So the next question, we've seen the tech industry take a hit with layoffs. It's predicted the industry could cut more than 900,000 jobs in 2023. Why is this, and has North Carolina been impacted?
Yeah, so North Carolina's been impacted. The top reason is that the tech industry added millions of people during the pandemic because they normalized to what was a pandemic world. So in a pandemic world, more people are working from home, fewer people are out shopping, out doing anything. And so the tech industry ramped up. They also ramped up because there was opportunity to grow and to create profits during that period of time. We're now renormalizing, and renormalizing is back to 2018-19. And that's a time where there weren't as many tech workers on their staff. And so we could find lots of examples where, and I'll use just generic, where a company had 100 employees. During the pandemic, they had to get to 150 employees, but now they're laying off 20. They're still at 130. And the headline is that they laid off 20. The headline's not that the re-normal is still higher than it was before. So that's part of it. Second part of it is that money is tighter. Technology tends to ramp up when money is cheap and they can try lots of new things. And so money is more expensive right now. Interest rates are higher. And so tech companies are not experimenting with new risk. And so they're laying people off because they don't need them for that. So there's a couple things that come into play. North Carolina certainly has places that were impacted, but when I talk to tech companies, they still need workers. There's a thing that is going on in San Francisco. I don't remember which company it was. Somebody laid off, 10,000 people, and 8,000 of them got a job in the first week with somebody else. A big fair out front. I think that there's a churn that is always part of technology, and some of that is just opportunity. But overall, turnover rates in tech sector are still much lower than most sectors. So they make nice headlines, and technology is a headline generator these days. So I think that's part of it.
And I'll just add that we're hearing a lot that people who are getting laid off maybe from a tech industry, but if they have the tech skills, they're getting employed maybe by these other industries and becoming part of that other circle of the tech occupations part of the economy.
Yeah, so the data then would show that tech industry went down, but not overall workforce. As we know, we're at 50-year historic unemployment lows. So somebody's getting a job somewhere, and I think Skylar's right. He's correct that it's banks and construction companies and local governments and everybody are desperate for good tech workers. So it's a movement.
Right. And it makes a headline when it's 100 people being laid off, but not 100 people being hired. So
if one company lays off 100 people, it is a headline. But if all 100 people go to work for 20 different companies, nobody's ever going to know.
Right. So next question, how might H-1B visa holders and people who moved into the state, especially in the triangle layoffs, are they more or less likely to be impacted by layoffs? And what are NC Tech companies' attitudes on addressing that?
Hard question. I don't know that they're more likely to be laid off. HB1 visas are part of a broader national angst over immigration policy in general. The visa issue is an odd one in that it creates champions and detractors that cross aisle. And so that's an oddity about it. I think that I'm an optimist. So I think there's a comprehensive immigration policy in our future in the next 5 years. And I don't think this year, but in the next 5 years. I think that we understand as a country that we need the best and brightest in the world, and that's how we got to where we are today. So I think that the Triangle is a hotbed, not one of the top ones in the country, but a hotbed for H-1B visas. I think it'll continue to be. I think that the needs will still be there, and I don't see that it will be impacted any differently than the rest. But I'm not an expert on immigration law, so I'm more likely to have status quo than anything else.
All right, so we have two more questions that will probably wrap us up. Other than what you see from NC Tech, which is excellent, thank you. What other sources of news, information, and events should we be tuned into to stay Ted Abernathy informed? Economic development, of course, but how do we stay updated and informed about jobs, about resources, and about what is coming?
Yeah, so nobody's allowed to hire Skylar because he keeps me informed, but that's so can't do that. I get asked a lot, what do I read? And the answer is everything I can get my hands on. So I read probably 25 different news sources in the morning. Part of that is just being a skeptic that anybody knows too much about it. If whoever the questioner is, if they've heard me speak, we talk a lot about collective intelligence, that all we can ever do is learn from each other. So the way I get most of my information is that we talk to businesses every day because somebody's paid us to talk to them. So we're surveying and interviewing businesses all the time, and I hear stories and they tell me things, but I read everything the government puts out, everything that the Wall Street Journal does, everything that Brookings does, everything that Cato does. Both sides of the aisle, we try to look at as much data as possible, and then we try to separate what is a headline that is there to be a headline and what is information inside the data. So we get lots of headlines that don't actually tell you anything about what you just read. So read a lot of things. I also am pretty heavy into social media from the standpoint of I read lots of things on LinkedIn. And people know that I like research. So on LinkedIn, people send it to me all the time. So if you tell people that you want to get that information, they'll send it to you. Skylar, where do you get information?
Same, like from the data perspective, it's about just often seeing the data and trying to get trends. I'll say Moody's has some good stuff. They have a podcast that I like to listen to about what's happening on like the macro scale that helps keep me informed pretty good. But like you, I'm looking at a variety of sources.
Yeah, just to add, our whole team are big podcast listeners. I listen to Foreign Affairs every week. I listen to The Economist every week. I mean, there's a whole list of them that we follow because they're if you're in your car, or you're on an airplane, or you're wherever, that's the fastest way to get information that has been synthesized for you. So I probably listen to half a dozen to a dozen podcasts on the economy every week. I listen to some fun ones too, but at least those every week.
And our last question, we are seeing some major companies like Apple, Google, and Amazon expand into North Carolina. Why do you think these companies are choosing to open hubs here?
Two simple reasons. Well, three simple reasons. The first one is they believe they can make money here. So park that over there. The second one is our cost of doing business is better, and our business climate is better than most of the places where they're concentrated. North Carolina is the only state in the country that is rated as best place to do business by almost everybody who rates. So we're top 5 in Forbes and CNBC and CEO Miami, everybody. So it's a great place to do business. It is a less expensive place to do business than they tend to be at. And because depth of workforce talent is the key driver on competitiveness, they believe they can probably steal somebody else's employees, or because of the reputation and quality of life, they can get their employees to move here or transfer here, or new people are coming. I think it's that simple. And as long as we remain a high quality of life moderate cost of living state with a great business climate, you're going to continue to see that movement. So I think it's just that simple.
And often the brand names follow the other big brand names. Also, they know someone else has done their research and know there will be a competition for talent.
Yep, good point. And yes, we are a follow the leader world, and that I don't know who the leader is. I do know I'm probably one of the older people on the call. We can tell you the history of how IBM got here or how Burroughs got here and seeded both the state's IT group and its life science groups. And there's long histories, but they go back to 65 for IBM, 71 for Burroughs. And North Carolina did when they built the Biotech Center and they built MCNC and they endowed chairs at their universities, this has been 60 years of building an infrastructure for a state that works for technology. And then
Right.
How old is NC Tech now? You just had a birthday, right?
30 years last week.
And so we're working with states right now that are starting to form tech councils. And for 30 years, NC Tech has been talking in legislators' ears and listening to their members and trying to make the state a better state for technology. So there's a bunch of things we've done right over the years. A few we've done wrong, but a bunch of things we've done right that lay that foundation. I'm usually really proud of talking about the tech in North Carolina when I'm out in the rest of the country.
Well, I think that's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for that, Ted. And I'll owe you for that nice comment later. We appreciate everyone being with us this morning. And Ted and Skylar, thank you for the overview and especially for the question and answer session at the end. And hope you all have a great day. And Ted, hope you have a great flight and make it to your destination on time.